This is Let's Talk Business with your host, Marc Ebinger. Now, here's Marc.
Welcome to Let's Talk Business, a show that highlights and promotes entrepreneurs to learn more about their vision, goals, and marketing strategy. Coming up on the show today, we're going to talk about what LLC businesses are doing that weakens the LLC protections and exposes business owners to personal liability. In studio with us today is Keaton Frieberg, a business attorney and partner at Texas Suits Law Firm. Keaton, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Mark. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
I love your enthusiasm, man. And you're dressed nice, too.
Hey, thanks. So are you.
Well, thanks, buddy. I'm your host, Marc Ebinger, the owner of Krukus Virtual Staffing, a company that specializes in hiring virtual assistants from outside the United States.
And I'm your co-host, Jenevy Sims with the Evolve Firm, where we help entrepreneurs evolve so they can elevate.
And I'm Kyan Frith, CEO of KV Impact Consulting. We're CFO consultants, and we're helping business owners realize their dreams.
A quick reminder to follow the Let's Talk Business podcast on all major podcast platforms and social media where you can catch video versions of the show anytime. You can get to everything easily from our website at satalkradio.com. Now, if you're going to be in the San Antonio area on Thursday, May 16th, be sure to join us at the next Let's Talk Business Mega Mixer. We're expecting over 150 local business owners and entrepreneurs on-site to mix, mingle, and connect with each other to do more business. You can get to all the information on our website at satalkradio.com. Now, a quick shout out to our sponsor, one of our sponsors, which actually Keaton's right here in the room, which I think was very appropriate to shout out when he's in there.
That wasn't by design?
Yeah, it was by design.
Okay.
Totally, yeah.
Awfully appropriate. Yeah, don't you know?
Thank you.
Well said, Mark.
All right, so quick shout out to the Moon Moving, one of the gold sponsors for the upcoming Let's Talk Business Mega Mixer. To the Moon Moving is owned by Adam Martinez and Keaton Frieberg, who ensure their moving teams make your next move as stress-free as possible. So if you're moving homes, apartments, offices, or storage units in the San Antonio, New Braunfels, Austin, and surrounding areas, To the Moon Moving is your one-stop professional moving service. So give them a call. That's To the Moon Moving at 210-549-7230, and let Adam Martinez and his moving team provide you with an out-of-this-world moving experience. Once again, that's 210-549-7230. So, Keaton, thank you very much for sponsoring the Let's Talk Business podcast Mega Mixer. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. You did it last time as Texas Suits, but you're also one of the owners of To the Moon Moving, which is a phenomenal service. Tell me just real quick a little bit about what Adam's doing out there with the To the Moon Moving, where he's at, what he's moving, and what he does to really kind of personal care, because a lot of stuff can get broken or damaged when people are moving, but I know Adam and his team really take extra care to make sure that stuff is done well.
Yeah, and I think really what it boils down to is our team. Our team is a group of guys that'll come out. You feel comfortable having dinner with them, having around your table. You know, they're engaging in conversation with you if you want to. Super friendly, and just they really care about your stuff at the end of the day. And so going to extreme lengths to make sure that everything is properly wrapped, taken care of while it makes its move. And so at the end of the day, I think that's what our moving company does right, is just hires really, really great people.
Yeah, and then, packaging that stuff up so that you can throw it from, what did he say? You could throw it from the second story down the ground. It probably wouldn't even damage it. I know he was just kidding, but
we would never do that.
Sounds like it needs to be tested, actually.
You know what?
Sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, it should be a challenge. You should get that on video.
Definitely.
And we'll take it, and then, I don't know, you could edit it down to where it looks perfect. But no, you don't want people thinking you're throwing their stuff from the second floor.
No, you really could, though. You could wrap an item so tight and with so much of our wrapping paper that it literally would bounce if you dropped it. But I mean, we wouldn't do that.
And that's part of the standard service?
No.
Or is that an enhanced service?
It costs extra for that.
Okay.
There's going to be an upcharge for that. All right, so also, and of course, for those of you who are watching on video, you notice I'm dressed a little bit differently this time. I am wearing a suit custom designed by Adam Ross. Super excited that they are also one of the sponsors. It's a Let's Talk Business event. They're going to be there. Keaton, you're going to be wearing your Adam Ross.
I'll be wearing my suit.
Love it.
Yep.
So you've had a suit a little bit longer than, what do you like about their clothing?
So basically, my favorite thing is the fit of my pants. The way that they kind of taper down at the bottom, hug my ankle just how I want it. That's what I love the most. And then also, obviously, of course, all the custom wear. Getting to go in for the experience, pick out, all the little accent colors and whatnot it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, it was a great service, and Heather Wren does a great job. The suit was returned, right? Usually you go and you have a fit after it's been made, and then you're like, okay, well, maybe it needs to be adjusted here or there. She got it perfect the first time, took it straight
Same
home.
for me. Same for me.
How long did that process take?
So, I mean, I was in and out within an hour, I think, when we did the initial measurements. And that's with, of course, they provide drinks if you want to kind of hang out and chat a little bit. But then it was 3-week turnaround on the custom clothing. And then I was out, headed it home and taking pictures and showing the wife and all that kind of stuff. She really likes it as well.
It looks like you got a shirt too.
Yeah, I did. So I've got the shirt, the pants, and then actually I got 2 pants, 1 shirt, and then 1 jacket.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A great look on you. Can we expect to see you like this all the time now?
I'd love to wear it all the time. I'm probably going to need some more sports coats, though, or some more suit jackets to kind of up my game. But so we've got a photo shoot coming up. All of us are going to be there. Keaton, for those who don't know, you're going to be joining the crew as a co-host. What are your thoughts there?
I'm super stoked. I thank you all for letting me be a part of it, because this is going to be awesome.
Cool. What do you think you're going to bring to the I'm going to put you on the spot here, right?
Whoa.
What are you going to bring to the podcast?
We need to know.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We're going to dive in. I feel like we're going to dive in deep to the inner workings of individuals' companies. That's what I really want to get into. What exactly are you doing on a day-to-day basis that makes your company, different from others, stand out? I mean, I know everybody does that, but I want to dive into the fundamentals. What are we doing? What are our employees doing or executing on a day-to-day basis that makes our business so great?
Cool. It's going to be nice to have a business attorney's perspective. You also do real estate as well, right?
Yep.
What do you do for the real estate community?
So a lot of it goes together. For example, I might have a real estate investor come in who wants to set up a business to protect their investments, their properties. So a lot of the times they go hand in hand together. And so we're setting up entities, we're moving entities over to their LLCs, making sure that, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but making sure that they're complying with all formalities to make sure that they really do have that separateness from their personal assets and their company assets.
All right, excellent. So I guess we go ahead and get into really, people get LLCs because they think that this is the blanket protection that they need, right? But there's things that happen that we're supposed to be doing, and then there's things that maybe business owners do that weaken that protection that maybe we don't consider. So that's kind of where I wanted to open that up, as far as start with maybe what is an LLC, okay? And what does it really protect? Let's start there, and then we'll open up for everybody.
Well, so I kind of want to ask you guys this question, because I get asked this question all the time. What is an LLC? What does it do? And so I've answered it thousands of times, but I kind of want to know what everybody else thinks an LLC is, or what they think that it does. And I think that this answer changes depending on who you're talking to. I mean, if you're talking to an accountant, it's probably different, or what purpose. But I'm gonna put you on the spot. What do you think an LLC is and its purpose?
Well, it was interesting because Mark was saying many people go into an LLC because they just think that they've then got this like blanket immunity. And that's not right. They've got limited liability, but someone can still go after them. There's still loopholes. There's still things that you're not protected from, and people don't really understand what they're signing up for when they sign up in an LLC. You think these days it's so easy just to sign up an LLC online. You can just do it within half an hour, but nobody. I think if you go out on the street and ask someone, have you got a business? They go, yeah. How's it structured? Oh, I've got an LLC. Okay, so what does that mean then? Well, I'm protected.
Yeah, exactly.
From what? And they have literally no idea at all. So that's how I would understand it.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I've only had our LLC for a short period of time. I haven't been here for very long. I'm kind of intrigued on the nuances between, do you want to have that word over here? I mean, obviously, now you're wearing an English-style suit, you'll get this kind of lingo better now.
You're rubbing off on me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that very much. You're looking awfully dapper. And I'm really interested in those nuances between the LLC and the limited companies back in England. My understanding of an LLC would be that limited company structure where it's literally limited liability again,
All right, yeah. So I think
I'm kind of wondering what Geneviev's view is.
Yeah.
Oh, Well, with my company, when I first started my business, of course, I had my attorney, and we talked over the different options. And of course, the LLC was the one that we thought would be best for the corporate structure that we wanted to create. And then when we ended up having partners, then of course, those membership rights and those structures changed. So just having that all in place, I think with the LLC, there's so much that you have to go through. I think the paperwork that we signed was over 20 pages, it seemed like. It went on and on. And I think that gave us a better understanding of everybody's
Obligations.
responsibilities, what's required for us to make sure that we have our paperwork correct for our meetings and standards, to make sure that when we send it to our CPA and everybody else, that everything is in order and in line. So it really helped us as business owners make sure that we have everything set in place before we continue doing business.
So when you were just speaking about how you set up with your LLC, you touched on something there that was fascinating. You used an attorney.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I didn't use an attorney.
Okay.
I used an online service. A lot of people are now using the online service because it said, just for this small amount of money, I can set up an LLC plus my state fees, nice and simple.
Yep.
So they're doing that, but then they'd not get, you had to go through 20 pages. I didn't have to do that. It was dead simple. Now, I come from a corporate background, so I was kind of comfortable, but I wonder how many people set up an LLC and they don't understand what it is that they're actually signing up for. You know, they go, I've got this idea, so I'm gonna go and do this, you know? And actually, you know, we were talking just before the show about what mistakes do LLCs make. Well, the LLC don't make the mistake, but the people do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yep.
They really do. Anyway, I'm sorry. Pass it over to you.
I think for me, I was more afraid of making mistakes before I even got started. And so that's why I wanted to make sure I did it right with an attorney, so that there weren't any things right off the starting gate where people are like, you were supposed to do this. And, you know, then that would be on me as a business owner. And that was a risk I wasn't willing to make at that point. And that's, you know, when I started my business, of course, you allocate your budget. And that was a budget that I wasn't willing to move. I was determined to have an attorney.
But a lot of people aren't willing to put that budget aside for an attorney because, you know, to keep them in their custom Adam Ross suits and so forth, those fees for setting up an LLC are fairly high compared to an online service.
And I think
You know,
certain
and
industries...
It's very hard.
Yeah.
Well, and
industries
so
too.
Keaton and Texas Suits, you guys did my LLC online, and it's about that thick. I mean, it's all in a binder squared away. So,
Absolutely.
but getting it done right is super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anybody can go and create one online, right? It's not, that process I don't think is terribly complicated. It's understanding the inner workings of your company. I think that is I think that's where you get the value.
But that's not shared when you do it online.
Oh yeah, no,
You know,
exactly.
Yeah. So I suspect if we were to go and ask people here in San Antonio, what's your structure? I have an LLC. Do you understand?
Yeah,
don't have a clue.
or what does that mean exactly?
So let's get into the definition. So just what is an LLC?
So I mean, it's a limited liability company, but I mean, so it limits whose liability is really the question. It limits the company's liability. It limits the members of the company's liability. And so I really think that it's best explained in more of an example. The way that I think of a limited liability company is this sophisticated child. Okay, so this sophisticated child can enter into contracts. It can own assets. It can do. I mean, it has an employee identification number. It's like this person. It's like a whole nother person. And I say a child because you still have to have somebody sign on behalf of it. You know, enter into contracts with it, buy the property for it. So it can't obviously do anything on its own. Somebody has to put it in motion. But at the end of the day, it's this other, you know, figurative person that is engaging in business. That's the way that I like to think of it, and that's the way I explain it. So hopefully that makes sense.
I find that a scary thought to have a sophisticated child who can enter into contracts and things.
Well, you're doing it on behalf of them, though. The sophisticated
I
child
get it.
isn't the one entering into the contracts.
So what are the major protections that an LLC affords the members of that LLC?
One of the huge protections is charging order protections. And so what that means is that if there's a judgment against one of the members of the LLC, the sole and exclusive remedy for a judgment creditor is a charging order, which says that if a member of a LLC goes to take a distribution and somebody has a judgment against that individual's interest, they can latch on to that distribution. And the reason for that mechanism is so that they're only affecting that one individual member and not actually going and foreclosing or messing with the business structure. So if we're all in business together, okay, and we all own an ice cream stand together, and I have a judgment against me, what we don't want somebody coming in and messing with the business, messing with y'all's interest when it's really just me that this judgment is against. And so at the end of the day, if when we go to make our distributions, if it's 25, 25, 25, when I get my $1,000 distribution or whatever, some judgment creditor can latch on to my interest if we choose to distribute it to me.
So that's protecting the company against your actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but that's really good. But I was thinking of
It goes both.
Right,
Both
the other
ways.
side is. So tell me about the other side.
Yeah, so it means that if I am operating the ice cream stand and I mess up and give somebody, expired ice cream, I don't know how this would cause a lawsuit, but
A food poisoning
nowadays anything can happen, right? So yeah, food poisoning, something super severe, and company gets sued. I'm not going to be held individually responsible for the fact that I was operating on behalf of the company and accidentally gave you expired ice cream or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, see, that's how I viewed it, but I thought the other side of that was very interesting because it protects the company against you messing up.
Mm-hmm.
It protects all the members.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty cool. All right, so what are some of the, in your experience, maybe the top one or two things that people are doing that really kind of messes up the LLC, the protection of it? Maybe start with the actual definition of the fact that you can mess up your corporate protection, the LLC protection.
Sure.
So start there and then give me a couple examples.
So when you say you can mess up your protection, you're talking about veil piercing. And so what we're saying is that for some reason, and the courts have, I'll give a definition here in a minute, but for some reason, a court is going to allow a judgment or a creditor or a plaintiff in a case to go through the company's assets and reach either the individual personally and or reverse veil piercing. They're going to go through the person to reach the company. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So Texas now has what we call the actual fraud rule. And this is Fisher v. Blue Cross Blue Shield. And it says that in order to pierce the veil, a plaintiff must establish that a defendant has caused a corporation to be used for the purpose of perpetrating an actual fraud for the direct personal benefit of defendant. So now, it used to be a sham or an alter ego standard, which says that basically if me and my company are so intrinsically intertwined that you really can't tell the difference, that I can pierce through or reverse pierce either way. But now it's more of a fraud standard. So basically the company has to engage in misrepresentation to the point where you wouldn't really know the difference between the two. And that's our standard today. So what do we do to put ourselves in a position where we might be where the veil might be pierced? And so some of the new examples now I think really apply when we have maybe two companies that are operating and they might be very similar in nature. So for example, let's say that you have a moving company and you have the side that holds a company that owns the assets of the company, and you have the side of the company that engages with people. And maybe their names are super duper similar. Maybe it's Fast Movers Today is the one that you're contracting with, and Fast Movers Today 1 owns all the trucks or something like that, okay? And so we have a common name. And now if Fast Movers is paying wages for Fast Movers 1 employees, that's going to be an issue. If we're making distributions back and forth between these companies, that can be an issue. If we're entering into contracts and people don't know who they're really contracting with, are we contracting with fast time movers one, or are we contracting with fast time movers? That can be an issue. And so these type of inability to actually separate your two companies or yourself from these companies. I just gave an example of companies, but that could also be applied to if it was yourself operating these as well. Is what really puts us in a position to possibly have the corporate veil pierced.
And that's not really a fraud situation, right?
It's not, but it's more of a misrepresentation situation. Oh. Especially if it's intentional. If I'm intentionally confusing the public when I'm out here engaging in business, and that can be a fraud situation.
Gotcha. What are your thoughts, sir, Kyan?
I'm just interested on where the fraud would be in that example you gave.
Misrepresentation.
But if the general public is dealing with the first one,
sure,
not the asset owning,
mm-hmm.
and they're going to deliver the services, so the public is like, that's absolutely fine, I pay the money in there.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that money's moving between the two, and you want that's asset holding for protection purposes,
mm-hmm.
where's the misrepresentation there?
So let me guess.
Because that would just be a process.
Sure. Because
right?
it's like you're trying. If there's a problem, say to the fast movers, right?
Yep.
Broke something, and then they're like, well, who am I suing? Right? Who's liable? They're causing confusion there. Mm-hmm. That's where I think.
And what about?
But is the contract between the member of the public and that first company? And is it such that actually the first company is basically just a trading brand name and it's a shell company to all intents and purposes?
Yeah.
Now, if that's the case, I understand.
Yes.
Okay, so it's operating as a shell.
But what you would...
Fine.
Yes, and if it is operating as a shell, that's where our misrepresentation... It's where you could argue misrepresentation comes into place, right? And how do we defeat that? Well, what we would do is we would put in a lease agreement maybe between... What was it? Fast Movers 1 and Fast Movers?
Mm-hmm.
Between the trucks, the assets that are being used. Because if something happens to one of these trucks and it injures, let's just say even an employee. Yeah. Well, now it's causing confusion, like you said, that can ultimately be the source of misrepresentation.
I mean, I've seen this kind of thing happen in the UK where you have a business, it's the services arm, another one which is a client-facing one. Mm-hmm. There's a memorandum of understanding in place, so it's very clear on the services being provided. Back and forward, there's commercial terms in place. Fine, it stands.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
That's how we do it in England, of course, the proper way.
Yeah. So the judges are gonna be like, look, if it's confusing, then both you guys are liable. You know what I mean?
Honestly, I mean that's if me as a plaintiff side attorney, if I'm coming in here, I don't know the difference. Well, I'm gonna go after both. Why not? And then you show me the difference. Prove to me the difference. But if you can't prove to me the difference with clear corporate records, I'm gonna throw them both together.
How often do you come across that kind of scenario where you've got the two entities and there's no agreements in place?
Oh, all the time.
See, I mean, it's interesting from my experience in just 7 months being here, the number of times, not just even between common ownership entities, but between then a business and their suppliers, etc. Like no agreements, nothing's up to date. There's like, how? Mm-hmm. This is crazy,
right?
So I can imagine,
Imagine this scenario that comes across all the time. So somebody asks for money from a private lender. Private lender lends money to somebody who owns an LLC, and then that guy takes the money and he uses it for a different LLC. Well, I'm going to go after all three of them. Unless we have some sort of clear documentation between the two, I'm going after all of them. So yes, you see it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when it comes to neglecting state requirements, those things that fall under that category, the annual filings, fee payments, and renewals, what are some of your, your advice on that for business owners?
Sure. Yeah, is to use a CPA to make sure that your franchise tax fees are filed here in Texas. I don't even know how to file them because I don't ever do them. I make sure that as part of my annual returns, my CPA does it, and I don't even think about it. So you should just incorporate that into your business. Having your CPA make sure that the franchise tax fees are filed, because if your company, I forget the exact name that the state calls it, but basically it's out of existence. You don't have your shield is gone. You also don't have the ability to sue, which is something interesting. So if it's not in existence, I can't. And we entered into a contract. I can't sue on that contract if I don't have if I'm not in existence with the state. So it's kind of a interesting scenario we've ran across.
That is an interesting one. How often does that happen?
Not very often, but I mean it's happened because I've ran across it.
So how important is using the LLC designation? Why is that important, and how important is it?
So are we talking about when we're signing a contract?
Like in your branding, like on your website, in your business cards, in your contract documents?
Well, I think it goes back to the misrepresentation deal. I mean, I think that you want to clearly state who you are or who the entity is and who the public is engaging with, who they're dealing with. And you need to think about it from an owner's perspective. Who do I want the public to think that they are engaging with or dealing with? Because you should be framing information tailored to who you want the public to think you're engaging with. Because if you have all these assets over here and the public doesn't know who they're engaging with, well, they might be coming after these ones too. But if it's clear that this is who I'm engaging with, it's company one over here, then I think that you're going to set yourself up for a good situation. And like that comes with the signing contracts, which is something I see time and time again. Something you brought up earlier was that people think that they formed this company and now I'm immune. And so what I run across a lot with real estate investors is that they'll set up a company and they won't move their property into the company so that it's shielded from liability. So you do that by deeding property into the LLC, right? And people think, well, I set it up. Well, you set it up. You didn't. That doesn't mean anything. You gotta physically move assets or sign contracts on behalf of the company rather than yourself, and that's super duper important. Because if you think that just because I have a company in place and you go and you sign a contract and you don't designate the company as the one that you're binding to the contract, I mean, you're going to hold yourself personally liable at that point, which is obviously not the intent of these limited liability companies.
Is that the same process too when people put vehicles under their company names?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want that asset to be controlled by the company, then it's got to be moved over.
Absolutely. I remember I was talking to a client about that, and they're like, we're getting ready to buy all these trucks, but we're putting it under my name. That was when I was still actually helping consult with CarMax. And I was like, well, you can still put it under your company name. And they didn't know that.
Can you tell me about that? Because the thing that I run across is that, let's just say you're going to go buy a property. Well, lots of the times you form an LLC. The bank's not just going to lend to your LLC right off the bat, right? And so the hurdle is, well, I got to buy the property in my personal name, and then I got to transfer it over to the LLC, which technically violates the due on sales clause, and we got to get into that. So it's a hurdle to jump through. But is there a way to buy it in the company name without paying cash or anything like that? Or
yeah, absolutely. With CarMax, there's actually a set of paperwork, and of course, you got to just show the documents as well. And then depending on how you're purchasing it, there's different structures that you could do it. Like we've had several hospice and several home health care companies, and they purchased the SUVs, the white SUVs. That's a popular one for them.
Sure.
And so when they order a fleet of those, CarMax brings them in, we have a list of paperwork that's needed for them to provide. So it's almost in essence like if you were purchasing it on a personal side, but the paperwork is different.
Okay. And so is there a personal guarantor on that situation?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes, there is, because it still has to be backed up really by the corporate.
Mm-hmm.
And because that particular one, the home health care was a small business.
Okay.
They had to have their attorney come and prepare that paperwork for them too.
Got it.
So it
Does
was
that help?
signed off.
Does that help them establish their business credit? I mean, when you have like basically a personal guarantee, like a co-signer for the business to do something, will that help the business build credit? Do you know that?
As far as building the credit
For the business, yeah.
I would believe so. I think it did.
We're not sure.
I actually asked my banker this question last week,
Yeah.
And he said that it does. It's both. Well, a couple things. One, especially if you use the same financial institution again, which I guess CarMax is maybe a little bit different, but still you're building that relationship at the end of the day. And so he said that it'll help both your personal credit side and then the business credit side, and then also the relationship for future acquisitions.
And I've heard that, and of course, this is TikTok, right? So it's got to be true, where you get, if your vehicle is 6,000 pounds or more, then it's a write-off on the LLC side. But that's a tax question. I'm not asking you that. But
I've
what I
never
heard.
that one.
I've seen that on TikTok too.
You have?
Yeah,
All right.
it's very inspirational.
What's
I'm
your-
like, well, let's go buy more cars. Why not? The
I don't know
government's
if it's
paying
lease-
for it, right?
I don't know if it's lease or purchase. But, what's your social media choice? Where do you hang out?
When I'm on somewhere, it's either Facebook or Instagram.
Really? It's not TikTok? I'm
I
a
don't
TikTok
even
guy.
have TikTok.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't have TikTok.
Oh, it's so fun.
I'm not bowing to the Chinese.
Yeah, especially during election season. People lose their minds. It's a lot of fun to watch.
The problem is I'd sit on there and I would
It's a rabbit hole.
yes.
Yeah.
It is. Well,
I'm sure it's awesome.
set
though.
a timer for like 3 hours.
Wow. Let's find that
What,
on
is
your
that-
schedule. What
Wait,
do
is
you
that a
have?
long time? I
Three-
don't know.
3
Is it-
hours.
Is that too much? Okay, so let's talk about like single ownership LLCs versus multiple members, right?
Sure.
Type of situation.
Uh-huh.
So start there, like get into the definitions and the differences.
So going back to what you had said earlier, I think that when you have a multi-member LLC is when you really, I mean, I think you should get an attorney to at least explain to you what what you're doing and what your options are when you have an LLC, right? But I think when you have multiple members, that's when it's very, very important. Something you touched on earlier was the obligations. Everybody's obligations are usually documented in the form of an operating agreement. And those list out my responsibilities. Going back to our example of our ice cream shop, how many hours a week am I working? You can, and you should list all of these details out. Am I primarily responsible for social media? Are you primarily responsible for legal? What is everybody's obligations?
I'm in charge of TikTok.
And so, though, that area is, especially when you're dealing with somebody that might be close to you, I think is super important.
Oh, absolutely. I can't stress that enough.
Yes.
We had when we had 3 partners, and then the 2 left our company. It was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It was a mess just because of the dishonesty that took place, and they took half my clients. And my attorney and I sat down, and we had this whole plan. And eventually, I just said, you know what, he can do what he wants, but karma will catch up to him. I'm going to focus on what I do best. And I was able to get out of the red within a year because, they say make your character so good that so if anybody goes behind your back and talks bad about you, nobody will believe you, right? And that's what he did, was he went and bad-mouthed me to the community, which didn't work. I was able to expand my business even further than the original plan, but without those things in place, he could have gotten away with a lot more. So having kind of that shield to surround me and my business, because at the end of the day, it's all, my focus is my business.
Mm-hmm.
I built this from scratch for 14 years. I'm not going to let someone just walk away with it just because they want to. Yeah. So to have it, word for word in every detail, and sometimes, during this period, I'm going to tell you, I was emotional. I was an emotional wreck. I couldn't see through the tears. I couldn't read through. I needed to have my attorney literally hold my hand and go through paragraph by paragraph. Here's what this means. Here, what's your decision? What's your next step? So having this shield is so vital for any business owner that plans on going into partnership, because it is a breakup. It is a divorce.
Yep.
When somebody walks away from your company that you guys put together, and then on top of that, takes your property. So to have something written is just absolutely important. And to have somebody walk you through it is even more vital.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's because you can't necessarily think clearly. You
Right.
need to have somebody who's got a clear head.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting, the number of people who go into business at the start, 3, 4 friends, and really close, really good buddies. This is all going to be absolutely fantastic. No, you need to prepare for the worst. You need to have that. And we had this back in the UK, had this when I used to work in the offshore world, off the coast of France, as well, where really important in our legal structures, they're the limited companies, to have shareholder agreements. And the shareholder agreements were extremely detailed. So it meant that there couldn't be any there was no non-compete. There were certain terms on termination, certain ways of doing things, so you couldn't steal intellectual property. You couldn't be sharing. You couldn't, and right at the very beginning when you're setting out with friends, you just don't think it's going to happen, but you have to prepare for it. Just going, actually, we need to be prepared that actually it's going to hit the fan one day.
So it's, knowing your exit strategy going into it.
Yes.
I know you're chomping at the bit
Definitely.
over there, Keaton. Why don't you jump in?
Most important part
Is
is
the
your
exit
exit strategy.
strategy.
How am I going to get out of this if it doesn't work with the least amount of damage monetarily, emotionally to me, and especially at that point in time to the people that I'm going into business with.
It's like a prenup.
Yes. That's a great way to explain it. I'm going to write that down.
Prenup.
Something that you
Gotta
had
have that prenup.
Have you done yours as you've come on as a co-host? We will have ours in place for Mark.
Oh yeah.
You gotta
no.
read the fine print. You
Yeah,
gotta read the
I haven't
asterisks.
been provided it yet.
Have you not?
I'm not put on
But
notice.
But you've already accepted to come on.
Well,
We operate
Verbally.
in the gray area.
Verbally.
It's a handshake
What
deal.
were you thinking?
yeah, no, this is
Handshake. Oh gosh.
this doesn't apply.
How did he manage to convince you to agree to it just on a handshake?
It's that suit.
It's the suit. Yeah.
Did you read it?
Huh?
Moving on. Objection.
Squeeze me.
I object.
I object. I love it. So, but seriously, thinking about the exit when you're going into it, it's like, talk about some of those areas of an LLC that really people need to be paying attention to so that everything's clear and they're also protected should an exit or when an exit occurs.
Okay. Can I come right back to that?
You sure?
Okay, I'm writing it down so we don't forget.
Okay.
One interesting nuance that I wanted to point out that you had stated was, one, you said that you had an attorney help set up your entity. You also had an attorney, I don't know if it was a wind down or what the specifics were, whether you dissolve the company or not, but one interesting concept is that your representation when you're setting up your company can be a couple different ways. I can represent the entity itself that I'm setting up, and my obligations and duties are to the entity. The best interest of the entity is what's important to me. You can also, and what I would suggest, especially if you're investing, a lot of capital into something, is that you get another attorney to review what I'm doing on behalf of the LLC. And the other members should probably get their own attorney to review it as well. If you're investing a substantial amount of capital, it is vital to have somebody else other than the individual that's setting up the entity, also be looking out for your best interests. That way, if something does happen, or there is a wind down or dissolution, you have somebody that's on your side. Because at the end of the day, if I set up the entity, I can't help either of the two of you.
Yep.
Or
Because you
however
have-
many.
Yeah,
I have a
absolutely.
fiduciary obligation to the entity. So my job is to make sure that whatever happens between you two, going back to this little person, I'm protecting this little person. And so it's
Yeah,
really
it's
important
great
to
that
have
you brought
somebody.
that up. That's exactly what happened. So we had the Henley Law who put our LLC together, and then afterwards I had to go through Michael Ciclone, who helped me with the process afterwards because I couldn't go back to the original attorney who helped put it together because the protection, he has to be equal for all three of us.
Yep.
So he couldn't help with that situation.
Right. Yeah. And what he could do is if y'all came to a settlement agreement, he can help formalize a settlement agreement. But at the end of the day, it's really, you probably want your own independent
Yes,
counsel to help
absolutely.
advise on these.
And I didn't know that until I brought it up to him. He said, I can't represent you specifically.
That might be one of the big takeaways from the show right there, is that a lot of people don't realize that kind of a situation when they're going into a multiple member type LLC. You need to think about representation for you individually as well as for the entity itself.
I break that down in all of, if there's multiple members coming to me, I always break that down. Hey, look, just so y'all know, I'll put this together, and I can, if y'all agree that you want to, amend this operating agreement that I put together and you will both agree on it, fine, I'll make sure that it's there. But at the end of the day, if something happens between you two, I can't help you. So
It's good to get that squared away.
okay.
So I'm just really enjoying part of this conversation from an accountant perspective because you guys have got your business model utterly sorted that within your profession, you don't just take a single fee, but you can double, triple, quadruple. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, lawyers make the rules.
Yeah, they're good, eh? Wow.
Well,
Just
actually, to some
I'm
extent, it actually takes us away from out of the equation because I can only help with the initial
I'm
setup.
sorry.
But you're going to get a referral fee. Don't tell me you're not getting a referral
I'm
fee.
feeling really gutted right now. Could you just grab him a tissue?
It's like real estate agents. They're making money every time. If they're smart, they're making money on everything when it comes to whatever the real estate property is. What was the other thing you made note on? Or was that it?
Your first question was the difference between single member and multi-member. I get this question a lot. Does a single member LLC still have protections, limited liability protections here in Texas? And they ask this question because in some states, some states, as far as I know, a couple of years ago when I was doing my research on it, they will disregard the single member entity status. So you would have to include somebody else to actually get that limited liability protection. Here in Texas, single members are going to be afforded the same limited liability as multi-member entities. So wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, that's a good one. But what are some differences now that we need to be paying attention to when you have a multi-member LLC? Obviously, responsibilities, we talked about that. We got voting, but what about filing? I mean, what other differences are there between the two?
So, I mean, really, actually, at the end of the day, it ends up being the same. You're going to want, the only real big difference is our operating agreement, which I still think you should have if you're a single member, because at the end of the day, if you're, if your company's the subject of litigation, and I'm on the other side in discovery, I'm going to ask for all your corporate documentation. I want you to prove to me that you are actually operating this separate entity as a separate entity. And so the more minutes, operating agreements, more corporate documentation in place, the more it's going to prove your case.
So this brings up a really good point. I'm going to enjoy this. It's not like adversarial conversations, right? So let's talk about if you were going to try and pierce, you're helping sue an LLC, right? That's you're being hired to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What is a basic strategy you would take to rip that thing apart?
The LLC itself?
Yes.
Again, this is a high hurdle because we have our actual fraud rule. So what am I going to be looking for? Misrepresentation, commingling of. It depends if we're going after somebody who it's maybe a single member that doesn't have any other companies. But if there's other companies involved, like I gave that example earlier, we have maybe one company that holds our assets and one company that is our public-facing company. It kind of depends. But in discovery, I'm going to ask for all of your documents. Show me that you have an operating agreement. Show me that you have authority. Show me that person A has authority to make a decision on behalf of the company. Show me in your operating agreement that where you've designated authority to this individual, or do we have two people that came together to form a company, and one is the manager who literally has managerial authority to do X, Y, and Z because your operating agreement says so, and then one is only a member of the LLC, which is kind of a passive role if you've designated it as such in your operating agreement. So did member sign this contract with us, or did manager sign this contract with us? That's the kind of stuff that I would be looking for. And I would do the same in a deposition. I would just ask you about your corporate structure. What kind of tasks are you allowed to engage in your managerial capacity or in your membership capacity? What does that really look like at the end of the day? Where does the money go to when you have a sale? What bank account is it going into? Show me your bank account. Show me where the proceeds of the sale of the home went to your LLC rather than to yourself.
Okay, well, what about I know people make mistakes in this kind of stuff all the time, right? And being very aggressive. What are the common mistakes? Is that it? Those are the common mistakes people are making? Because I'm thinking also about what are your meeting minutes? Are you meeting? You're supposed to be doing that. I want to see that too. Because those are the things that people will skip over.
Right.
When it comes to, I haven't done my meeting minutes, right? Well, that could be an easy hit. I don't know how significant of a hit it is, but it's you pointed out some good ones where you would go, but I want more.
At the end of the day, I don't think that skipping your annual minutes is going to put you in a position to have the veil pierced. Okay. I think it's a pretty high standard to actually pierce. But what it can do is it can waste a bunch of time and a bunch of money, because now I'm going to send you a bunch of discovery requests about said subject. If you're not able to produce what I'm looking for, then we're going to have to go to hearing after hearing to even talk about can I pierce it? Can I pierce the corporate veil? Because it's not, piercing the corporate veil isn't a cause of action, so to speak. Like breach of contract is a cause of action. If you don't satisfy, or if you satisfy the elements of a breach of contract, I can bring that claim against you. I can't bring a pierce the corporate veil claim, right? That's something that gets hammered out during the litigation process. And so it's a way to impose liability, more liability than than what is already understood. And so at the end of the day, what I think it really does, following these corporate formalities, is it saves you time and money on attorney's fees if your company is the subject of litigation.
And what scares LLC owners the most when it comes to litigation?
Oh,
Attorney fees.
yeah.
I would say attorney fees. Yeah,
They go
not
through
only
the
that,
roof.
but then also the personal liability.
Yep.
See, to me, that's what I'd be thinking about. Is my house going to be attached? You know what I mean? That kind of a thing.
Right. And your house has a whole different set of protections, but at the end of the day, yeah, absolutely. Does these other objects that maybe are not exempt by statute, are they going to be subject to a creditor's reach? That's the scariest thing. And then, yeah, probably the fees that are associated with it. So you can control those and have peace of mind by having, your documentation in place, because that really solves both of those at the end of the
I'm
day.
also curious about attorney's fees being assigned to the loser. So is that something that happens? Like if you're going to bring litigation against somebody, right? Because it's a civil suit. Is it common to try and attach the plaintiff's attorney fees to the other side? What are they called? It's not defendant.
Yeah.
It is defendant in corporate and civil. Okay, so can those fees get attached to the defendant?
Absolutely.
Is that common?
Attorney's fees are awarded by statute or by contract. So if we have a breach of contract case and we have attorney's fees built in, it usually says something, and I'm gonna simplify this, but it says that the winner gets attorney's fees. And so
Nicely simplified.
Right. And if it's not written into a contract, then what?
Sorry, what was the question?
If it's not written into any kind of a contract
Then
beforehand.
I got to go by statute. So the statute allocates certain reasons why I can get attorney's fees. Maybe I have to send a demand letter and I have to wait 30 days. It just kind of depends on the circumstance and what kind of claims that you're going after. So absolutely. If the plaintiff is the prevailing party or if the defendant is the prevailing party can, in the overall judgment award that's handed down by a judge or a jury, you're going to include those attorney's fees.
Yikes.
Do you know, it's really interesting. I think one of the things I'm hearing today is actually it helps to be proactive.
Oh, yeah.
So from the very beginning, think about these things, be proactive, put the motions in place, the documentation in place that will actually protect you in your journey and the future of anything that may come up. And if you're just proactive in it. And I see a really alignment with some work I do, like in the cyber risk world with executives, where they're going, I've got cyber insurance. So I'm fine, if there's a cyber incident. Like, no, you're not. You don't understand the implication on your management time. You don't understand what the implication on your clients. You don't understand how you could basically ruin your business. And so actually trying to educate them to be proactive and do something about it to mitigate their risk. And that's essentially what we're talking about here today, being proactive to mitigate your risk of financial loss, of reputational loss.
And stress.
And stress, exactly. So it makes an awful lot of sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well said. Yeah, the foundation, if you think about this as a house, you want your foundation to be poured correctly. And yes, it takes a little bit more work up front. Yes, it takes a little bit more time and probably more money. But at the end of the day, yes, you're engaging in risk management, and from the beginning, it gives you more peace of mind, and it will probably save you money in the long run.
I mean, it's mitigation, isn't it? You're not taking the risk away completely. Mm-hmm. What we're not saying here today is that actually by doing these things, you're not going to have an issue.
Back to your immunity point, right? You're not completely immune.
You're just reducing risk.
Yep.
Which is really important.
So let's look at the real estate side of things. So I know people do LLCs for their real estate properties. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that a little bit? Help us understand what they're doing there, why they're doing it, and do you need an LLC for every single piece of property? If so, why? And does that feel a little bit like you're just, kind of being silly with all of that? what's the advantages there?
Sure. So the reason that our real estate investors are putting their rentals or whatever it is, the fix and flips, into an LLC is so that if something happens to them in their personal capacity, or because we've already established that liability runs both ways, or something happens at the property, that there's a division of liability between the two. Do we need a new entity for every property? Well, I think it kind of depends on what we're dealing with here. If we have a home one that's encumbered by a mortgage that is almost the same amount of the value of the property, and then we have another one that's in the same exact situation, I don't really know that it's necessary to do that, right? If we have an apartment complex that is owned outright, I would be a little bit more, well, I guess at that point, let's just say we have a couple of duplexes that are all owned outright. I might be a little bit more nervous about keeping all of those in one entity, right? Because if something happens to somebody at duplex number one and I'm found liable, or the company's found liable, well, now all of our assets are inside this little bubble. And so it in my opinion, it depends on the status of the property. The equity is a lot of the times it comes down to the equity in the property. In Texas, we have the Series LLC, which is awesome real estate mechanism, or real estate asset protection mechanism. Allows you to create one LLC up at the top and then sever off and make a bunch of what we call cells or series cells, and each property can go into a different cell, and they are all severed from liability from one another, just like a regular LLC.
As long as you treat it right.
Correct.
I suppose one of the things that would be worth adding in here is that I understand what you're saying there from a legal perspective. What I think also needs to be considered is the tax implications.
Absolutely.
So actually having an attorney and a CPA, but a real forward-thinking tax strategist working with you there, so you make sure you put the legal and financial in place.
That's a great point. Yep.
And from my limited experience here in San Antonio, but I'm fairly switched on in business, not all CPAs are the same. And I'm sure there's certain people that you would refer to. There's certain CPAs I would refer to because they're just the best when it comes to the tax planning, especially around something like this with property and investment property.
Yeah, usually I want my client to go after speaking with me, or maybe they've spoke with the CPA before, but I want their CPA to say, yes, this is in their best interest before from a tax standpoint, before we settle. Because obviously, I mean, before the series was around, I mean, what is the way to achieve maximum asset protection? Well, it's to open up a new entity for every single property, which I think is a little bit overkill.
Cumbersome.
Yes. But at the end of the day, if we're talking about maximum asset protection, that's it, right? But is that really helping you from a tax standpoint? Maybe not. So I always love
But having it coupled is really important. Tax planning and the structure, legal structure.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. Keaton, if folks want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can shoot me an email at Keaton, Keaton, at txsuits.com. They can give us a ring at 210-503-2800.
Awesome. All right, appreciate that. Great job. All right, as we wrap up the show, quick reminder to check out our latest podcast and catch video versions of the show anytime by visiting our website at satalkradio.com. That's going to be it for this one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Yes.